All right, so today I want to tell you about one of the biggest scams that has ever taken place in the history of ball pythons, and it has to do with painted snakes. Someone actually painted some snakes with watercolor and scammed a lot of people out of hundreds of thousands of dollars. It's actually been happening for the last few years. It's happened in multiple countries all over the place, pretty much a nationwide event, and a lot of people lost a lot of money. And before we jump into it, I kind of wanted to explain the history of ball pythons, just touch on why people got scammed out of so much money. It's pretty incredible. You may not know the history of the pricing of ball pythons. And essentially, when a brand new ball python morph comes out, it can sell for, I've actually seen snakes sell for over $100,000 for a single snake. And usually what it is someone finds a ball python in the wild, and it's the one of a kind. There's actually several ways someone actually can come up with the very first ball python. Sometimes you can actually find it in the wild over in West Africa, in Ghana, Benin, and Togo. That's pretty much where most of the ball pythons come out of. And you can see this crazy looking snake crawling around, and if it's actually genetic and it proves out, you can actually get a lot of money for that very first snake. And that's where some of the original morphs come from. And another one is sometimes morphs can be really subtle. You don't know if, sometimes it'll look like a regular classic ball python, and you import it in with some other like wild type snakes and mix it into your collection, and then you start mixing it with other genes like the yellow belly and the asphalt, some of those really subtle genes. But if you start mixing them together in certain complexes, you can see really impressive results in the colors and patterns of some of these mutations. Or I've actually seen when people are breeding ball pythons, it's kind of a weird anomaly. I've actually seen this in quite a few snakes when people are breeding them. They're actually just a spontaneous mutation. And you breed two snakes together, you're expecting a certain result as far as the offspring, and you get something completely different hatching out of those eggs. So those are kind of the three ways you can actually get brand new morphs. And what it comes down to is if you have something that is really impressive, really dramatic, and it's the only one in the whole entire world, a lot of people are really interested in buying that. So the supply is extremely low and the price is extremely high. So for example, if you take a look at this snake around my neck, this is Bobby, my bamboo ball python, really friendly snake. As a matter of fact, when the first bamboos came out, they were selling for over $100,000. And then as people bought into them and bred them and they became more popular, the supply increased, and then it kind of floods the market, which drives the price down. And now you can get a bamboo ball python for pretty much just a few $100. They're pretty reasonable. And some have actually come down where you can get some of the original morphs for like under $100. They've come down that much. So everyone's always looking kind of for the new thing. As a matter of fact, if you get something new, like if you popped out a bamboo, like the very first one, people would say, man, that's a really impressive snake. And if you can actually prove that it's genetic and you can reproduce it, then it really stirs a lot of attention, and a lot of people are really interested in buying that snake. So that's kind of the history of the pricing, and kind of the way the whole scam started is someone actually painted some snakes with watercolor, and they took like a normal classic wild type snake, they painted it black with watercolor, and then started posting pictures on YouTube, doing YouTube videos. They posted on Instagram and Facebook and said, hey, I just made this brand new morph. It's called the black ball. That's what they called it, the black ball. And then they actually took an albino, and this is kind of what we're thinking. I'm not exactly sure. Actually, you really can't find the original snakes because, of course, they disappeared. But we're pretty sure that they painted them with watercolors because we can exactly reproduce what those snakes look like using basic watercolors, kind of like the colors that the kids would paint with. So they actually produced this black ball, and then they took an albino and painted it red. And the interesting thing about a red ball python is nobody has actually produced a bright red ball python ever in the whole ball python industry. So everybody was really interested interested in the red ball. It was actually an albino painted red, and kind of the story behind it was the guy said that he produced the black ball, which he thought was recessive, and then crossed it with an albino to get this red, bright red ball python, which is like a red painted albino. And he's actually selling it as a double recessive, part albino and then part black ball, his new gene. And kind of the thing that really got everybody, as far as the scam, everybody got duped in the whole ball python industry. And the reason is because he wasn't selling the parents, he was selling what he said were hets. So for example, if you sell a het, it has one copy of the albino, one copy of the so-called black ball, which didn't really exist, and you sell them as double hets. So he sold all these double hets. As a matter of fact, I know one guy over in Germany invested 100,000 euro on some hets, which in American money here in the US, it's over $110,000 on a handful of hets. And the hard thing about hets is you actually have to raise them up for 2 to 3 years before you can breed them together and see if you can actually reproduce the red ball and the black ball. And if you actually produce you breed two double hets together, pretty much 50% of the clutch is going to come out visuals. You'll either get albinos, you'll get black balls, or you'll get the red ball. And the really the disturbing thing was when he started breeding these snakes together, he was getting all normals, no visuals at all. And then he found out later on that he actually wasn't the only person who got duped into the scam. There's other people around the world, some people here in the United States, that actually bought into this project, paid a lot of money. I don't even know how much they paid, but I'm thinking they got scammed for probably, I'm thinking hundreds of thousands of dollars all together in this big scam. And essentially everybody was producing normals. And by that time, it was years down the road. This guy cashed in on the scam and pretty much disappeared off the face of the map. And people have called the police, they're hunting him down, trying to figure out, that actually no one ever went to his place of residence to actually talk to him or see his facilities are set up. He just kind of, scammed people through the internet and then shipped out these snakes. It was really quite unfortunate. So if actually scamming people out of money wasn't enough, he actually duped someone who published a book. As a matter of fact, that was that very first person who actually paid 100,000 euros for those first snakes. He actually got pictures of the red ball and the black ball from, I think it was Facebook or Instagram. And he actually took those pictures and he put it into his ball python book. So right in the middle of the book, he actually has pictures of the red ball and the black ball as a brand new morph in one of his published books. And he actually published that book, and it wasn't until a couple years later till he realized he actually got scammed. Not only did he lose his money, but he's got these snakes in his book that don't even exist. Can you imagine the embarrassment of actually putting that into a publication and then having to deal with that after the fact? And I would say there's been quite a few people that have been scammed since I've been in ball pythons. I'd say probably the biggest scam, or I'd say the biggest thing where people actually try to steal snakes is at reptile shows. And let me tell you, if you're thinking about stealing anything from a table at the reptile show, you got to be crazy because there's so many people watching those tables. As a matter of fact, at one of my last reptile shows, they said someone actually tried to steal a snake, and he grabbed the snake off the table and he was running out the door, and they actually caught him at the door. Of course, everybody is looking in the whole place, and they have security there. They have security overnight, so no one actually comes in and steals anything. And they actually caught him at the door, and the story goes that when he was confronted, they said, "You either pay double for that snake or we call the cops." And he actually ended up paying double for the snake, and they let him go, which is pretty incredible. And then I actually got scammed one other time over the internet. It was actually a scam from, before I really knew what I was doing, I tried to buy a tarantula from Nigeria, of all places. And I don't know what I was thinking. I actually found this, there was a P Metallica. Have you ever seen the tarantula? It is really beautiful blue tarantula. And And the kind of the way the scam went is you actually pay for the tarantula, and then after you know, they say, all right, we're going to ship you the tarantula. They start making up all these excuses and say, oh, it's been stuck in the airport and we want another $50 to get it out of the airport. And they keep kind of milking it on and on and on, and pretty soon it just racks up more and more money, and you get in deeper and deeper the further you go. And luckily I actually paid for that tarantula with PayPal, and I contacted PayPal and instantly they refunded all of my money, and I didn't get too deep down the road into that scam. But I do know of a family member that is related that actually got into a really bad phone scam, and it was kind of the same thing where it was like one thing after another after another. Before they knew it, they were $50,000 down in debt. And let me tell you, some of these scammers can really do you in. You gotta really be careful. So probably one of the biggest things that most reptile breeders will warn you of is actually investing in ball pythons where you think you're getting like heterozygous, the het form of a gene, and actually don't get anything out of that. Or a lot of people, what they'll do is they'll say, oh yeah, this is 66% het for sunset or something like that. When the sunset first came out, they were selling for a lot of money, and then they're just selling you normal snakes. A lot of people will be, there's some people out there that'll actually be dishonest and try to scam the system. I'd say most people are pretty honest. It's just the one in 10,000 that really gives the reptile industry a black eye. People trying to scam the system. And I've actually seen people try to scam, where they'll sell you a normal, classic, wild type and tell you it's a het for something. But, this actually pretty much takes the case where you're saying you have a brand new gene and you're selling hets for that brand new gene. That is kind of a new angle on the whole scam. So hopefully you learned something. It's kind of unfortunate that, the reptile industry takes a black eye like this every now and then. It's extremely disturbing, and you really have to know. I'd say it's even the best of us can get duped, and it's not like you did anything wrong if you actually get scammed. It's always good to share the stories, get them out there, and then we can all work together to try to prevent people from scamming the system. So that is pretty much it. Thanks for watching, and I will see you next time.